Danke, Sean. So we've got a new toy to play with. So we might have to fiddle with it a bit as we go. Ordered it 4 months ago. It's just finally arrived. Thanks for coming. Good to see you all. I thought I was going to talk about the Anzacs today. Originally, being Anzac Day, I thought would probably be appropriate. In a roundabout kind of way, I am. We're going to continue on part 2 from what I started talking about a month ago. So, it's, like I said, it's kind of a bit of a 3-part series. You know, when the saints come marching in, if you remember. Last time we talked about our calling in our ministry and the responsibility of love that we all have. So today we're going to carry on with part 2. And I want to talk today on a couple of keys, basically on how to kind of do that in power, and an obstacle which we need to overcome. And next time we'll talk about putting it into practice and how we do that on a day-to-day basis. So last time we were looking at scriptures like, you know, those that say they love God and not their brothers are liars. It was quite a warm, uplifting kind of message. This time we're going to look more along the lines of, you know, to love your brother even as you love yourself. This is probably actually a bit up Margie's alley, so it's what I'm going to talk about today. So it's kind of fitting, I think, in a way that we kind of will honour her a bit. You know, who knows that you can only really love your brother as much as you understand what love is and how much you love yourself. So we're going to look at that. If you've got your Bibles with you, turn to Luke 15. Look at a classic old, the parable of the prodigal son, which I'm sure we all know. It's been preached a lot. And for those that don't, it basically is about, a lord and his 2 sons, and one of the youngest son asks for his portion of his inheritance early, and he takes off into the world and basically runs amok, and wakes up one day in a pigsty, going, "Yeah, this ain't good. I need to go home." I want to start reading. We'll skip the first bit. We'll go to verse 17. And it says, "But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this is my son. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry." There's 3 things I want to look at in that. And the 3 things we're going to talk about today is inheritance, condemnation, and compassion. And today's really about, I really want to talk about compassion versus condemnation. But to do that, we kind of need to look at inheritance first. So it's a bit kind of back to front to the way you read it. but it'll make sense at the end, so you have to trust me and bear with me. So when he came back, the father, there's four things that the father did. The first one was he called for the best robe. Now this no doubt would have been the father's own robe, and it represents a couple of things. Yeah, it covered his filthiness and his sin, so to speak, and it was like the robe of righteousness, that was put back on him. But it was also a sign of dignity and honour. It was proof of acceptance back into the family. The second thing was the ring. Now, a ring signifies sonship and position and authority. Especially back in the day, the wearer of the family ring, a lot of the time the rings had like the family crest on them. The wearer of the family ring, it made them basically a representative of the family with authority to speak on its behalf. The third thing he called for was sandals. Now this is a sign of being a non-servant, because servants didn't wear shoes back in the day, apparently. Neither do they wear rings or robes, I suppose. And it also kind of represents, if you look at the shoes of the gospel of peace, so it made him a carrier of the gospel of peace. The fourth thing was the feast, the fatted calf. Basically, they had a party. They had a big celebration. The fatted calf was saved for special occasions, and it also represents blood being shed. But I really want to look at the first three: the robe, the ring, and the sandals. When we first get saved, what is the first thing that God starts talking to you about and tries to establish? Very good. That's right. I don't know about anyone else, but the ones I have talked to, the first thing he normally says is he starts calling you by the name son. He really starts talking to you about who you are. Well done, son. I love you, son. And it's all about really about who we are. It's not so much about what we do and he starts to try to establish that in us. And it never really stops, or it shouldn't. 20 years after being saved, God still reminds me of who I am in him. Learning who we are in him is far more important than learning what to do in him. If we want to do anything of power or significance in him, it has to be based on who he is in us, and who we are in him. And this, above all other things, is our biggest inheritance. We talk about the inheritance of God, and that covers quite a lot. There's crowns and glories and mansions in heaven, and but really, the big prize is him himself.
Yes.
He is our inheritance. I love how David says it in Psalm 16. He says, "O Lord, you are the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You maintain my lot. The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Yes, I have a good inheritance." Yes. Above all things, we inherit God. Father of us all, Lord of everything. And it really is probably the most important thing that we can learn in our Christian walk, to really get our heads around. The most powerful Christians that have ever walked the earth, they know this. They know who they are in him, who he is in them, and what he's called them to and anointed them for. It's not that they're necessarily perfect, or they're, you would have seen plenty of guys that have fallen from grace but have had powerful ministries. they know what they're called to. They know that the God in them, what God in them is wanting to do. So if we're going to move in power in our ministries and our callings that we talked about, and being able to love our brothers, and we have to know who we are. In that knowing who we are, there comes an authority. Knowing that we're the Son of the living God. Knowing, and this obviously all is born out. We have to know who He is first, because it's His character, and that it's Him that's in us. But knowing who we are, what we call to, what He's anointed us for, the authorities we have, that's what really can help us make a difference.
Yeah.
I love that when Jesus cast the demons out of the guy into the pig. Everyone know that story. He simply just said, "Go." There's one word, "Go," and they fled. That's authority. He knew who He was. I want that kind of authority. I don't know about anyone else, and And I'll say this with all due respect, especially to Margie, and I don't mean this. It's a, he didn't need to bind this and loose that and call down the blood and put the cross, and you know what I mean. And I'm not saying that there's not times for that. So I'm not meaning to be disrespectful for you at all, Margie. But there's also times when it's just an authority that you can just go. I'll give you an example. When we were in Vanuatu a couple of years ago, this is the first time I really kind of experienced this. Mum was teaching a school over there for a week, and we were doing night meetings, and in this open park night meetings. And been going for 3 or 4 nights. It had actually been going for about a week or two before we'd even got there. They know how to hold crusades over there. So I'd actually preached this night, and I was in a really good place with God. I was, you just know when you can feel the anointing flowing through. He's with you. You're just in that. You're just powering. And Mum and I it's finished, and we've gone into this little hotel to have something to eat, because we were hungry before we went back to our room, and there's a table of people having dinner there, and as soon as we've walked in, this one guy who had obviously been enjoying his ale decided to come up, and he came up all friendly. He's like, "Oh, so you're the guys that have been holding these crusades?" And I said, "Well, not us personally, but we've been speaking. I spoke tonight," and just like that, he just started manifesting, and I mean manifesting, swearing, cursing. He went off his brain to the point where the hotel staff were coming over, his friends were coming over, and then he started threatening physical violence. And I thought, here we go. And it was obviously not him. You could see the demonic influence on him. But yeah, as soon as he started threatening violence, it was like, we can't have this. So I don't know where it came from. I don't know why. Or I just looked straight at the guy, or more at the demon really than him, and just said, "Don't." And this guy was going Burko, like his friends were almost pretty much restraining him. He wanted to punch on. And as soon as I said the word "don't," he just stopped and went, "Okay," and walked off. Went back to his table and started finishing his beer. I just kind of looked at Mum and gone, "Cool," That was authority.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to talk myself up or anything. That was like as much of a surprise to me. And I'm like, so I've experienced that, and I want to live that. I want to walk in that.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis. So I'll get on to now want to talk about compassion and condemnation, but I needed to bring that up. I needed to talk about the inheritance side of things, because us inheriting him and who he is in us, which obviously makes us who we are in him, it's everything. Actually, I've got, while I think of it, you don't have to look at these now. Can you take one and pass it down, Alice, please? I've got these handouts for us all. You don't have to look at them now, but God challenged me. These are some things I got off Marky, actually, and it's about who God is and who we are. And God challenged me a while ago and to start, just take like 10 minutes every day. It only takes about 10 minutes to read through it. And actually start speaking it out and declaring it over my life. Now, it's a bit hard to get a bit of peace and quiet to do that every morning in my house. So I've now pinned them to the back of the throne room door. But I'll tell you what, the days I have done it, it amazes me how different my day is, how much of a better mindset I'm in, a better place I'm in. So I'm going to invite you to do the challenge with me, or I'm going to invite you to do a 30-day challenge. I'm going to do this until I've memorised it. But I want to invite you to, for the next 30 days, pin them up on your throne room door or wherever it is you get. Just do it at the beginning of the day, because you'll notice the difference. It really only takes about 10 minutes to go through it. But speak it out over your life. I am forgiven. I am loved by God. I am, and just read through that list. And you watch. If you're not feeling 100% better in 30 days, I'll give you your money back. No, you know what I mean. I guarantee. And if in 30 days you can see the difference, start memorising it, because this stuff here is the greatest weapon and defence we have. Now, I'm going to talk about condemnation in a minute. It leads me to my next point. But when the devil comes at you saying this, that and the other, to be able to go, no, I am this. No, this is what God says about me. It's one of those powerful keys we can learn. So we go back to the prodigal for a bit. He says, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Condemnation. Self-condemnation. I'm not worthy. There's two meanings to condemnation. There's the act of judicially condemning someone to a punishment, like a sentencing, i.e. like if you're in a courtroom, you're sentenced to a lifetime, I condemn you to a life sentence. A lot of the time that's the one we think of when we think of condemnation. There is no condemnation through Christ Jesus, and there's that eternal aspect to it of being condemned, to death, so to speak. The other side of condemnation is the act of pronouncing to be wrong or unfit for use, the expression of very strong disapproval. And i.e. there's something wrong with you. Yeah. You're not worthy. Now, I actually believe these two are one in the same thing. Or same in design anyway. They both keep us in prison and bondage. One's the internal condemnation. But the other one's that's the mindset and beliefs that we have about ourselves. And that's what decides how free or how tied down we are. And Satan can't keep us in his prison for eternity. He'll keep us in bondage in life now as much as possible. It is Satan's greatest strategy against us to keep us shut down and unempowered. Condemnation attacks who we are, not just what we do. So it'll say, you are this, or you're not that.
Yeah.
It says there's something wrong with us, and we're stuck, not as God created us to be. It keeps us defeated and weak because it removes our faith in Him and who He's made us to be.
Right.
So we all know Satan's called the father of lies. So what is it that he lies about? He lies about who God is. He lies about who God is in us. He lies about who we are, and he lies about who others are. From the beginning, from the very beginning, even in the garden, Satan called God a liar. It was the first mention of Satan, pretty much, and what he did. He attacked his character. He basically went, "No, God's dodgy. He don't really mean what he's saying. He's trying to keep something from you." He attacked God's character. Interesting enough, when Satan tempted Jesus in the desert, if you look at it, he said, "If thou be the Son of God, turn the stones to bread. If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down." And then he basically asked him to fall down and worship him. So twice he questioned who he is. He questioned and challenged, if you're the Son of God, and it was almost like a... And then he tells him to give up who he is. Give up that you're the Son of God and worship me. It was still the same thing. He's attacking the character. He's attacking the who he is. This is the greatest weapon the devil has. Now, I personally know this one well. There's certain things that come against people their whole lives. They're like assignments. Have you ever heard the experience Mum had with that little demon? It was called malice. It's the same thing that's come against Mum. So if there was something that came against me, it's condemnation. It's a lifetime full of just, you sure? You're doubting yourself, and you're not worthy, or you're not loved, you're not being kind of surrounded by people who at times have been just disrespectful, dishonouring, so I know this one well, and if anything, it's the thing that will still try and come against me. And guess what I've been coming against this week? Surprise, surprise. We go back to the prodigal. He says, "I have sinned and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." Now, he should have just stopped at, "I've sinned." Because at that stage, he was just confessing his sin. Yep. It was what he's done. Yep. As soon as he went on to say, "I'm no longer worthy to be called your son," he's in self-condemnation. Now, interestingly, God's response to that is get a robe, get a ring, get some sandals. It was restitution of who we are. The first thing he did was come against that self-condemnation, the condemnation, and said, "No, you are my son. No, you're not a servant. No," you know what I mean? And he restored who he was. He disagrees that we're not worthy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Scripture says it's for freedom that Christ set us free. Yeah. Freedom from what? Well, freedom from bondage. Did he mean just eternally? Or does he mean now? See, true freedom is knowing who we are in him. Galatians 5:1 says, "Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage." We must be careful of how we talk and think about ourselves and others, and our mindsets and perceptions. Anything short of what God says about us or about other people is agreeing with and siding with the devil and putting us or others in bondage. We can look at actions and fruit, but when it comes to the who, only God's opinion counts. It's interesting, especially as prophets. We can be so black and white about this is wrong, it's right and wrong. Right and wrong. Don't care, black and white. This is what God's way is. It's not God's ways, you know. And, you know, prophets are called to speak God's thing. But there's this whole grey area in the middle of the black and white where there's a person. We can never forget that there's a person attached to the right and wrong. And as prophets, we only know in part. We don't know their life story. We might catch glimpses of it. We might discern some stuff. We don't know what they've been through. Only God knows their entire life story. We don't know what kind of childhood they had. We don't know what kind of abuses they've been through, you know. Only God can really judge the heart, you know.
Yes. Yes.
So it comes down to, as Margie puts it, separating identity from behaviour. Anyone that sat with Margie for 5 minutes would have heard that saying. Now this leads me on to the third point that I have, compassion. Because compassion can see through, past the black and white, through the grey. It's a powerful key that I want to look at now, especially when it comes to ministering, and especially for the saints that are going to be out in the world, because you're going to come across some really messed up people. Actually, if you're in the church, you're going to come across some really messed up people. So, a good key to have no matter where you go. So if we go back to the prodigal, so we've gone kind of backwards. We've gone, I love this. When he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. One of God's names is El Rakum, or as an Australian would say it, El Rakum, mate. It means God of compassion. It's spelled L, E-L, R-A-C-H-U-M. Now, Rakum comes from Rakum comes from Vrakum with an E, and it means womb. Interestingly enough, I had to think about this. What jumps to mind when you think of a womb?
Spirit of the moment.
Thanks, Jess. One, it's some people say comfort. It's safe comfort. But it's also where life starts. Now, interestingly, it's out of God's compassion for us is where our real life starts. Because as he's moved with compassion for us, the meaning of compassion is a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a desire to alleviate the suffering. Now, literally, it means to suffer with or to suffer together. Now, if you just do the first bit, a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, that's empathy. Compassion will be accompanied by a desire to alleviate the suffering. So, to suffer with or to suffer together, if God is suffering with us, as he does when he looks down, if you see your child suffering, you're just as much suffering with them. If God is suffering with us, he's not going to want to stay there, is he?
No.
Hence why he starts pulling us out. Now I looked up compassion and I suggest you do this at home. Pull out your concordance, look up compassion. I was amazed at just how many of Jesus' miracles were intrinsically entwined with compassion. He healed their sick. He healed when he was moved with compassion. He forgot the servant of his debts when he was moved with compassion. He healed the blind when he was moved with compassion. He healed the leper when he was moved with compassion. The demons into pig guy, he said to him, "Go and tell them Jesus had compassion on thee." The loaves and fishes miracle, he came down from the mountain and was moved with compassion for them. He healed the widow's son. He had compassion on the mother. There's some pretty major miracles there, and they're all because he had compassion. It's a major key for us. We can't underestimate the power of compassion. We really shouldn't underestimate the power of compassion. It's probably one of the most powerful and life-changing forces around.
Yes.
Even unsaved, unspirit-filled, worldly people can make massive differences when they're compassionate people. When you look at people like Mother Teresa, how much impact did that woman have? How many lives did she change? Imagine if she was spirit-filled.
That's right. That's right.
I believe compassion, especially when accompanied with knowledge of people's true design and purpose, in other words, the real who of who they are created to be, it has the ability to see the real person. You can see past all the kind of filthy rags and the unwholeness and the sin and the offensive behaviour and the, well, I've been in some pretty bad relationships in my time. And I've been abused pretty badly at times. But I've had times in the middle of that when I've had this wave of compassion come over me. And you can just see, like the inner child, or you see the person that God created, you see the person that was meant to be, and and you see past, and you can, it's amazing what you can justify and kind of forgive, so to speak.
Yeah.
When you move with compassion and you can see that real person, when you go, I don't know what kind of childhood is that person? I don't know whether they've been abused or, Now I've seen mums sit there and look at and talk with murderers and just not see any of that, You see straight past all that into that little inner child, or that, that hurt, wounding person that's had the life from hell, And I really believe that that's how God sees us, and that's how we need to see others.
Yes.
It's not that he doesn't see the sin and all that kind of thing, but, when he looks down at his kid who's just a dirtbag, or whatever, he's like, that's not what I created you to be. That's not the life I intended for you, And there's something in him, and we can see that, the prophetic gifting can discern things, and you can, but that compassion that comes with it is the desire to help them get out of that situation, And that's what God feels when he looks down, and that's what we need to feel. If we're going to go out into the world, compassion is a major key to how we do it.
Yes.
We're going to need to, because you're going to come across some offensive people that are probably going to spit in your face, and, when we go out, do we see, what do we see when we see that person? Do we see, a sinner that's going to burn in hell? Or do we see a sinner that's going to burn in hell if we don't do something to help them? That's the difference. So, I'm just going to read some, just because I thought it was interesting. Science has actually started to kind of measure the effects of compassion and doing tests on the brain and stuff. And I just thought this was interesting. Obviously, God's bigger than all of this, and but when we feel compassion, our heart rate's slow, and we secrete oxytocin, or they call it the bonding hormone. It's the areas of the brain linked to empathy, caregiving, and feelings of pleasure light up, causing us to want to approach and care for people. Preliminary findings suggest, however, that being compassionate can improve health, well-being and relationships. Many scientists believe that compassion may even be vital to the survival of our species. And they're finding that its advantages can be increased through targeted exercises and practice. That's interesting. We'll get back to that. Not everyone's born like that, you know. We're not naturally sometimes the most compassionate person in the world, particularly prophets. Again, black and white, I don't care. Just supposed to be this way. We can actually grow in it. We can work at it. Compassion makes us feel good. A compassionate action, example, giving to charity, activates pleasure circuits in the brain. And compassion training programs, even very brief ones, strengthen brain circuits for pleasure and reward and lead to lasting increases in self-reported happiness. Being compassionate, tuning into other people in a kind and loving manner, can reduce the risk of heart disease by boosting the positive effects of the vagus nerve, which helps to slow our heart rate. One compassion training program has found that it makes people more resilient to stress. It lowers stress hormones in the blood and saliva and strengthens the immune response. Brain scans during loving kindness meditation, which directs compassion towards suffering, suggest that on average, compassionate people's minds wonder less about what has gone wrong in their lives or might go wrong in the future, and as a result, they're happier. Compassion helps making caring parents. Brain scan shows that when people experience compassion, their brains activate in neural systems known to support parental nurturance and other caregiving behaviours. Compassion helps make better spouses. Compassionate people are more optimistic and supportive when communicating with others. Compassion helps make better friends. Studies of college friendship show that when one friend sets the goal to support the other compassionately, both friends experience greater satisfaction and growth in the relationship. Feeling compassion for one person makes us less vindictive towards others. I like that. Restraining feelings of compassion chips away at our commitment to moral principles. Employees who receive more compassion in their workplace see themselves, their co-workers and their organisation in a more positive light, and they report feeling more positive emotions like joy and contentment and are more committed to their jobs. More compassionate societies, those that take care of their most vulnerable members, assist other nations in need and have children who perform more acts of kindness. They are the happier nations. Compassionate people are more socially adept, making them less vulnerable to loneliness. Loneliness has been shown to cause stress and harm to the immune system. So how to cultivate compassion? We often talk about some people as being more compassionate than others, but research suggests compassion isn't something you're born with or not. Instead, it can be strengthened through targeted exercise and practice. There's some places that do compassionate training. Look for commonalities. Seeing yourself as similar to others increases feelings of compassion. A recent study shows that something as simple as tapping your fingers to the same rhythm with a stranger increases compassionate behaviour. That's why musos dig each other so much, maybe. Calm your inner worrier. When we let our mind run wild with fear in response to someone else's pain, example, what if that happens to me? We inhibit the biological system that enables compassion. The practice of mindfulness can help us feel safer in these situations, facilitating compassion. Encourage cooperation, not competition, even through subtle cues. A subtle study showed that describing a game as a community game led players to cooperate and share a reward evenly. Describing the same game as a Wall Street game made the players more cutthroat and less honest. This is a valuable lesson for teachers who can promote cooperative learning in the classroom. See people as individuals, not abstractions. When presented with an appeal from an anti-hunger charity, people were more likely to give money after reading A Starving Girl than reading statistics on starvation, even when those statistics were combined with the girl's story. Don't play the blame game. When we blame others for their misfortune, we feel less tenderness and concern towards them. Now that's a big one.
Yes.
Because we do. We look at people and we tend to judge, you put yourself through this, or, you know. So blame the devil. Because no matter what situation that person's in, I guarantee the devil's had an influence on getting them there.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, no one asked to have
30 days.
a crap rubbish life. You know, not many people inherently just want and choose to be evil and nasty. You know, it's normally from a lifetime of a life that's been orchestrated. You know, at the very least, they're deceived. You know, they've been lied to. So if you're going to look at someone and see all that, it is the devil that did that to him, no matter what, because God created that person for a much better life.
Yes.
So anything short of what God created for them,
Truth.
blame the devil.
Yep.
Respect your inner hero. When we think we're capable of making a difference, we're less likely to curb our compassion.
Right.
If not, look at the Jesus hero in us. Jesus is a hero. Notice and savour how good it feels to be compassionate. Studies have shown that practicing compassion and engaging in compassionate action bolsters brain activity in areas that signal reward. To cultivate compassion in kids, start by modelling kindness. Research suggests compassion is contagious. So if you want to help compassion spread in the next generation, lead by example.
Come on.
Curb inequality. Research suggests that as people feel a greater sense of status over others, they feel less compassion,
Yes.
arrogance and pride. Don't be a sponge.
Yeah.
I watched Margie learn this lesson when she lived with us. When we completely take on other people's sufferings as our own, we risk feeling personally distressed, threatened and overwhelmed. In some cases, this can even lead to burnout. Instead, try to be receptive to other people's feelings without adopting those feelings as your own. So, can everyone see it's an important, you know, it really is one of the main principal cornerstones of Christianity. It really is. We should be leaps and bounds ahead of the world in this. I'll let you make up your mind as to whether we are or not. So we can practice at it. It's something we can grow in. We can actively choose to go, I want to become a more compassionate person. But we can also get prayer for it. And since we have one of the most compassionate people in the world that I've ever met, she doesn't know I'm going to do this. I want to give an altar call, but I want to step out because I want to actually be in it. I want to ask Margie to pray. I can't stress enough how important this is, guys. We have to know who we are in God. That in itself will also help us to know what other people are, which will help compassion. Because the very same things that we're called to and the very same inheritance that we've got is what God has in store for other people as well. So to be able to look at them and know and to see past all the dung and filthiness and, you know, we have to know, no, God's called them to be that, you know. Have you ever wondered what's so powerful about the prophetic? And you look at all the stuff that when you prophesy, you can read their mail and tell them, you know, this, that and the other about their history. And that's nice. It confirms that God knows them. I've seen hard, tough men break down and cry when that prophecy says, but God says you're this. It is the most powerful thing. It's the thing that gets us saved. It's the thing that reduces us to tears and breaks us down and makes us humble. When God says, I say this about you. You know. To do that, we have to know what God says about them and what God says about us. So please do the challenge. I guarantee in a month's time you will feel 100% better and stronger in God. Learn who you are. Learn who, and it is obviously, like I said, we have to learn who God is. There is a thing on that as well, who God is, and that's not all of it. That's a small portion, but it's a really good start. To really come into power, we have to know who we are, and that's why the devil's so strong in his strategy of condemnation. As long as you believe I can't, I'm not, that's an area you're not free in. It's an area you're not going to move in power in. And he wants to keep you weak. He wants to keep you unempowered, You want to get out there and do miracles and all that kind of stuff, you have to know who you are. You have to know God Almighty of the universe is living within you, and what that means. What does that look like? You'd be amazed if you actually took a hold of your own thoughts, just how programmed we are to believe things about ourselves that God doesn't say.
That's right.
How are you going to move in faith? Faith, does miracles and moves mountains and that, when you don't believe that God's going to do it through you. I'm telling you, I suffered for this years. When I walked away from the church, I'd be down the pub getting drunk, telling people they need Jesus. And they'd be like, well, what about you? Well, he just doesn't love me. But he loves you. You need him. No. Convinced about that. He loves us all, just not me. I'm not worthy. I've screwed up too many times, or whatever. And that's major stuff. But there's so many little things, that we speak over ourselves, that we think about ourselves, that that is not what God says, and we're agreeing with the devil and being kept in bondage. And as soon as we say it about other people, ooh, in trouble. So, I'll leave it there. So now we've looked at part one was the responsibility of love, what we're called to do. Today was how we can do it in power. And if you still love me, you can come back next time. We'll look at how to do that on a practical, everyday basis, how to actually put rubber to the road, so to speak, yeah? So I'm going to get Margie up. Sorry, Margie.
It's okay.
One final thrust, or So if you want more compassion in your life, it's not going to be a full-on, 20-minute ministering session with each person up here. Margie's just going to come and just pray quickly and say, please, Lord, help them to know who they are, and to not believe the lies of condemnation anymore, and to grow in compassion for others with that. So, but this woman, more so than anyone I've ever met, compassion on legs, So if we're going to get prayer, I want it from her. I could do it, but she'll do it better. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll see you next time.